What if I told you that somewhere behind closed doors a conversation about you has already taken place? A conversation you were never meant to hear. A discussion that may reveal more about your connection than months of direct communication ever could. Most people believe that the biggest moments in life happen right in front of them. But the truth is, the events that change our destiny often begin in secret within quiet rooms, hidden thoughts, and private reflections. Right now, there may be someone who cannot stop thinking about you. Someone who has reached a point where your presence has become impossible to ignore. Your name, your energy, and the impact you've had on their life may have become the subject of serious consideration. Questions have been asked. Feelings have been examined. Truths that were once hidden may have finally come to light. But here is the surprising part. What was said may not be what you expect. The conversation may have revealed fears, hopes, emotions, and realizations that even they were not fully aware of before. Sometimes the most powerful discoveries are not about another person, they are about ourselves and how deeply someone has affected us. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand this connection and the unseen forces working behind it. There are moments in life when something important happens far away from our eyes, beyond our awareness, and yet its effects begin moving toward us long before we know what has occurred. Human beings often imagine that only visible actions shape their destiny, but many of the events that influence our lives begin in private conversations, silent reflections, and hidden decisions. The idea that your soulmate had a private meeting about you points toward one of these unseen moments. It suggests that somewhere in a space you could not enter, in a conversation you could not hear, your name became significant enough to be discussed. What makes this possibility so fascinating is not the meeting itself, but what it represents psychologically. People do not gather their thoughts around someone unless that person has begun occupying a meaningful place within their inner world. When an individual repeatedly appears in another person's mind, they become more than a passing thought. They become a symbol, a question, or even a potential answer to something deeper. This is how meaningful connections often begin. Long before words are exchanged openly, an invisible process unfolds beneath the surface. A private meeting about you may not always mean a formal gathering. Sometimes it exists as a conversation between trusted friends, family members, or people whose opinions matter. At other times, it is a meeting that occurs entirely within the mind itself. One part of a person weighs logic while another part speaks through emotion. One voice points toward caution, while another urges movement forward. Human beings are rarely as simple as they appear. Inside every individual exists a dialogue between different desires, fears, hopes, and expectations. When someone feels strongly about another person, these inner voices become increasingly active. What is remarkable is that such discussions often arise when a person can no longer ignore the impact someone has made on their life. Your presence may have created questions that demand answers. Why does this person remain on my mind? Why do I feel different when I think about them? Why does their absence feel noticeable? These questions do not emerge from ordinary encounters. They appear when a connection begins touching something deeper than daily interaction. Many people assume that attraction is only about emotions, yet deeper connections awaken something more profound. They challenge old beliefs, reveal hidden desires, and expose fears that have remained buried for years. When this happens, a person naturally seeks clarity. They look for guidance, perspective, and understanding. This is often why private conversations occur. The individual is attempting to make sense of an experience that feels larger than logic alone can explain. In many cases, the discussion revolves not around who you are on the surface, but around what you represent. Every meaningful relationship acts like a mirror. Through another person, we begin seeing aspects of ourselves that were previously hidden. Your soulmate may be discovering qualities within themselves simply because of their thoughts about you. They may be recognizing strengths they forgot they possessed, vulnerabilities they tried to conceal, or dreams they abandoned long ago. The conversation becomes less about gathering information and more about understanding transformation. The most surprising aspect of a private meeting is often its sincerity. Public conversations are frequently shaped by image and expectation. Private discussions, however, tend to reveal what people genuinely think and feel. Behind closed doors, masks become less necessary. The truths that emerge in these moments are often the truths that carry the greatest weight. A person may finally admit feelings they have denied, concerns they have hidden, or hopes they have been afraid to express. What makes such a moment significant is that it marks a transition. Something that once existed only as a vague feeling begins taking shape. Uncertainty starts transforming into awareness, thoughts become clearer, emotions become harder to dismiss, whether the person realizes it or not. The very act of discussing you indicates that your presence has moved beyond the ordinary and entered a space of deeper meaning within their psychological world. There comes a point in every meaningful connection when presence becomes stronger than distance, stronger than silence, and sometimes even stronger than direct communication. This is the moment when your energy becomes impossible to ignore. It is not about physical appearance, constant conversations, or dramatic actions. It is about the invisible influence one person begins to have on another person's inner world. Long before major events unfold, there is often a subtle shift in awareness. A person starts noticing that someone continues to occupy their thoughts, return to their mind unexpectedly, and leave an impression that refuses to fade. Human beings are deeply affected by energy, even if they rarely describe it in those terms. Every interaction carries more than words. It carries emotions, intentions, attitudes, and psychological impressions. Most encounters leave only temporary traces. They appear briefly and disappear just as quickly. Yet certain individuals create a different effect. Their presence lingers. Their memory remains active. Their influence continues operating beneath conscious awareness long after the interaction has ended. This is when energy begins becoming impossible to ignore. What makes this phenomenon powerful is that it often happens without deliberate effort. The strongest impressions are rarely forced. They emerge naturally when someone expresses an authentic version of themselves. Authenticity has a unique psychological effect because it stands out in a world where many people are hiding behind expectations, social roles, and carefully constructed identities. When someone encounters genuine, confident sincerity, depth, or emotional honesty, they feel something that is difficult to explain but impossible to overlook. Your soulmate may find themselves thinking about you during unexpected moments. Perhaps they are occupied with daily responsibilities, focused on work, family, or personal goals, and suddenly your image enters their mind without invitation. They may hear a phrase that reminds them of you, visit a place that triggers a memory, or experience an emotion that somehow connects back to your presence. These moments often seem random on the surface, but psychologically they reveal something important. The mind naturally returns to what it considers meaningful. People tend to believe they control every thought they have, yet much of the mind operates beneath conscious awareness. Deep impressions continue influencing behavior even when attention is directed elsewhere. This is why meaningful connections can feel so persistent. The individual may attempt to focus on practical matters, but part of their attention keeps returning to the person who has captured their interest. Not because they choose it consciously every time, but because something within them recognizes significance. Another reason your energy becomes difficult to ignore is that it may awaken qualities they have not encountered in a long time. Certain people remind us of forgotten aspects of ourselves. One person may awaken hope. Another may inspire courage. Someone else may encourage emotional openness. These experiences create powerful psychological associations. Instead of simply remembering the individual, the person begins remembering how they feel in that individual's presence. The emotional impact becomes attached to the memory. This process can be confusing because it challenges ordinary explanations. A person may wonder why thoughts of you continue appearing. They may try to analyze the situation logically, searching for clear reasons behind their growing awareness. Yet me experiences resist simple analysis. The heart and mind do not always follow predictable patterns. Sometimes a connection develops quietly, gathering strength beneath the surface before becoming fully visible. As your influence grows, people around them may begin noticing subtle changes as well. Their mood may shift when your name is mentioned. Their attention may become more focused when conversations involve topics connected to you. They may appear distracted, reflective, or unusually interested whenever thoughts about you arise. Even if they attempt to remain neutral, the energy of a meaningful connection often finds ways of expressing itself indirectly. The deeper reason your energy becomes impossible to ignore is that it is no longer functioning as an external experience. It has become part of their internal reality. Your presence exists not only in memories but in expectations, reflections, hopes, and questions about the future. The mind pays attention to what it believes matters, and when someone repeatedly returns to the same person in thought, emotion, and imagination, it reveals that the connection has moved beyond casual interest and entered a place of genuine psychological importance. Questions about the future rarely appear without reason. They emerge when something in the present begins feeling significant enough to deserve deeper consideration. When your soulmate starts raising questions about the future, it suggests that your connection has moved beyond a temporary curiosity and entered a space where possibilities are being explored. Human beings do not naturally invest mental and emotional energy into imagining future outcomes unless they believe something or someone has the potential to play an important role in their lives. The future exists as a psychological landscape filled with uncertainty. No one can see it clearly, yet everyone attempts to form images of what may come. These imagined futures are shaped by hopes, fears, desires, and personal experiences. When another person begins occupying that landscape, it reveals a change in perception. Instead of viewing life as a path traveled alone, the mind starts experimenting with the idea of shared experiences, shared goals, and shared emotional journeys. Your soulmate may find themselves wondering where this connection is heading, even if they cannot yet explain why. At first, these questions may appear subtly. They may think about how different situations would feel if you were present. They may imagine future conversations, future opportunities to connect, or future moments that have not yet happened. These thoughts often arrive quietly, without announcement, but they carry important meaning because they indicate that your presence has become integrated into their vision of what lies ahead. One of the reasons future-oriented thinking becomes so powerful is that it forces a person to confront what they truly value. In daily life, many decisions are made automatically. People follow routines, obligations, and familiar patterns. However, when they begin imagining a future involving another person, deeper priorities come into focus. Questions arise about compatibility, emotional fulfillment, trust, growth, and long-term happiness. The individual starts examining not only the connection itself, but also the kind of life they wish to create. This process often triggers reflection on past experiences as well. Human beings naturally compare potential futures with previous outcomes. If someone has experienced disappointment, heartbreak, or unmet expectations in the past, they may approach new possibilities with caution. At the same time, meaningful connections have a way of challenging old conclusions. A person who once believed certain dreams were unrealistic may begin reconsidering them. Someone who had become emotionally guarded may start imagining what openness could look like again. The questions that emerge are not always simple. They often involve uncertainty and contradiction. One part of the mind may feel excited by possibility, while another part remains cautious. One voice encourages movement forward, while another seeks reassurance. This inner dialogue is a natural part of any meaningful connection because the future always contains risk. To care about someone is to acknowledge that their presence matters, and once someone matters, the outcomes become emotionally significant. As thoughts about the future continue developing, the connection begins influencing decisions in subtle ways. Priorities may shift. Certain opportunities may appear more important than they once did. The individual may become more aware of their own emotional needs, personal goals, and long-term aspirations. Rather than thinking only about immediate circumstances, they start considering broader questions about direction, purpose, and companionship. What makes these future-oriented reflections especially meaningful is that they reveal investment. The in tends to focus its energy on what it considers valuable. When someone repeatedly returns to thoughts about where a connection may lead, they are giving that connection a place within their psychological future. They are no longer viewing it as something confined to the present moment. Instead, it becomes part of an unfolding story whose next chapters are still unwritten, yet already important enough to capture attention, emotion, and imagination. Unexpected truths often emerge when emotions become too strong to remain hidden. For a long time, people can avoid certain realities about themselves, their feelings, or the impact another person has had on their lives. They distract themselves with responsibilities, rational explanations, and daily routines. Yet beneath the surface, the unconscious mind continues collecting evidence. Feelings grow quietly, observations accumulate, and insights develop in places beyond immediate awareness. Eventually, a moment arrives when what was hidden can no longer stay concealed. This is when unexpected truths begin to reveal themselves. In the context of your soulmate's private meeting, these revelations are not necessarily dramatic confessions spoken aloud for everyone to hear. More often, they appear as realizations that surprise even the person experiencing them. A thought that was once uncertain suddenly becomes clear. A feeling that seemed temporary reveals itself to be persistent. An emotional connection that was previously underestimated begins showing its true depth. The surprise comes not because the truth was absent before, but because it remained unrecognized. Human beings are remarkably skilled at hiding things from themselves. People often believe they understand their emotions completely, yet much of their inner world operates outside conscious awareness. Feelings can exist long before they are fully acknowledged. A person may convince themselves that someone is only a passing interest, only to discover later that the connection has occupied a much larger place within their heart. They may tell themselves they are unaffected, while their thoughts repeatedly return to the same individual. These contradictions reveal the distance that can exist between what people think they feel and what they actually feel. During private discussions, whether with trusted individuals or through deep personal reflection, these hidden realities often rise to the surface. Questions that were avoided are finally confronted. Emotions that were minimized are examined honestly. The individual begins looking beyond appearances and asks themselves difficult but necessary questions. Why does this person continue occupying my thoughts? Why do their words stay with me? Why do I feel a sense of importance whenever I think about them? Such questions have the power to uncover truths that were previously hidden behind distraction or denial. One of the most surprising discoveries may involve recognizing the emotional influence another person has created. Many individuals underestimate how deeply they have been affected until they pause and reflect. They suddenly realize that their mood changes when they think about someone. Certain memories carry unusual emotional weight. Future possibilities begin including that person's presence almost automatically. What once seemed insignificant reveals itself to be meaningful. Unexpected truths also emerge when people recognize qualities they admire but had not consciously acknowledged. Sometimes a person is drawn toward another because they embody characteristics that resonate deeply with their own psychological needs. Strength, kindness, authenticity, wisdom, confidence, or emotional depth may create a powerful impression. Yet these qualities are not always identified immediately. Only through reflection does the person understand why the connection feels different from others they have experienced. Another revelation may involve fear. While people often focus on attraction and affection, meaningful connections frequently expose vulnerabilities as well. A person may realize they fear losing an opportunity before it fully develops. They may discover concerns about rejection, uncertainty, or emotional exposure. These fears themselves become evidence of significance because people rarely fear losing what they do not value. The presence of anxiety often reveals the presence of genuine emotional investment. As these truths come into focus, old assumptions begin dissolving. Narratives that once felt convincing no longer hold the same power. The individual becomes more honest with themselves about what they feel, what they hope for, and what they cannot ignore. The process is often transformative because it replaces confusion with clarity. Hidden emotions gain recognition. Unspoken realities gain definition. What was once buried beneath the surface rises into awareness, carrying with it a deeper understanding of the connection and the role it has come to play within their inner world. Human beings rarely exist in isolation. Even when personal feelings are private, the effects of those feelings often become visible to the people around them. This is why others sometimes notice changes before the individual fully understands them. When people close to your soulmate begin noticing your impact, it suggests that the connection has grown strong enough to influence behavior, emotions, and patterns of thought in ways that can be observed from the outside. What may have started as an internal experience gradually leaves traces in the external world. Every meaningful connection creates a psychological ripple effect. Thoughts influence emotions, emotions influence behavior, and behavior influences the way a person interacts with others. Family members, friends, and trusted companions often become sensitive to these shifts because they are familiar with the person's usual habits and attitudes. They recognize subtle differences that strangers might overlook. A slight change in mood, a new sense of excitement, moments of distraction, or an unusual level of reflection can all signal that something important is taking place beneath the surface. Your soulmate may not openly discuss every feeling they have, but emotions have a way of revealing themselves indirectly. A person's energy changes when they become emotionally invested in someone. They may smile unexpectedly when a particular topic arises. They may seem more thoughtful than usual. Their attention may drift toward memories, possibilities, or conversations connected to the person who occupies their thoughts. Those around them often notice these small shifts and begin forming their own conclusions about what might be happening. One reason others detect your influence is because meaningful connections tend to alter perspective. When someone encounters a person who genuinely matters to them, they often begin looking at life differently. Their priorities may shift. Certain end goals may feel more important. Some worries may lose their intensity, while new hopes emerge. These internal changes naturally affect the way they speak, make decisions, and engage with the world. Friends and family who observe these developments may sense that a new influence has entered the person's life. People are especially observant when emotional patterns change. If someone who is normally reserved becomes more expressive, others notice. If someone who often appears indifferent suddenly shows enthusiasm, curiosity, or emotional depth, questions arise. Human beings instinctively search for explanations behind significant behavioral shifts. As a result, those closest to your soulmate may become aware that someone has captured their attention long before any formal acknowledgement occurs. Another important aspect of this process is that meaningful connections often encourage personal growth. When an individual feels inspired by another person, they may begin developing qualities that had remained dormant. They might become more confident, more open-minded, more optimistic, or more willing to confront personal challenges. These positive changes rarely go unnoticed. The people around them see the transformation and naturally wonder what or who has contributed to it. In many cases, others recognize emotional importance through repeated patterns. They notice how often your name appears in conversation, how frequently certain topics return, or how much interest is shown whenever something related to you is mentioned. Even attempts to remain neutral can unintentionally reveal significance. The more a person tries to dismiss or hide an important connection, the more noticeable certain reactions can become to those paying attention. What makes this dynamic particularly meaningful is that outside observers are often less influenced by personal uncertainty. While your soulmate may still be questioning their feelings, friends and family can sometimes view the situation with greater clarity. They observe consistent behaviors, recurring emotional responses, and subtle transformations that point toward a deeper reality. Through their observations, it becomes increasingly evident that your presence has extended beyond a passing impression and has begun shaping thoughts, emotions, and attitudes in ways that are visible not only to the individual themselves, but also to the people who know them best. Every meaningful connection eventually reaches a point where reflection alone is no longer enough. Thoughts can circle endlessly, emotions can deepen quietly, and questions can remain unanswered for a long time. But sooner or later something begins moving toward a decision. This movement is often invisible at first. It does not arrive with dramatic announcements or sudden declarations. Instead, it develops gradually within the depths of the mind, where possibilities are weighed, emotions are examined, and future outcomes are considered. When a decision is questioned, forming, it means that the connection has entered a new psychological stage. Human beings naturally seek certainty. The mind is uncomfortable remaining in a state of endless ambiguity. While uncertainty can be tolerated for a period of time, it eventually creates tension. A person begins feeling the need to understand where they stand, what they truly feel, and what direction they wish to take. This internal pressure becomes stronger when emotions are involved because meaningful connections demand attention. They refuse to remain unresolved forever. As a result, the individual gradually moves from observation toward choice. Your soulmate may have spent considerable time analyzing the connection from different angles. They may have questioned their emotions, evaluated their experiences, and compared their feelings with past relationships or personal expectations. Such reflection is not a sign of weakness or confusion. It is often a sign that the connection matters enough to deserve careful consideration. The deeper the significance, the more seriously people tend to approach their decisions. A quietly forming decision often begins with small realizations rather than major conclusions. The individual notices patterns that can no longer be ignored. They recognize how frequently thoughts of you return. They become aware of the emotional influence your presence has created. They acknowledge that certain feelings have remained consistent over time instead of fading away. These observations accumulate like pieces of a puzzle. Each realization contributes to a growing sense of clarity. One of the most important aspects of decision-making is the relationship between emotion and reason. Many people imagine that these forces operate in opposition to one another, yet meaningful decisions often emerge when both begin moving in the same direction. Emotion provides motivation and significance, while reason evaluates practicality and long-term consequences. When someone S considering an important connection, both elements become active. The heart asks what feels meaningful, while the mind asks what is possible. A decision starts forming when these two voices begin finding common ground. During this process, the individual may also confront fears that have previously remained hidden. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of change, and